Hi, everyone. Welcome. Let's make sure that. That sounds like it's echoing. Second here. Is it echoing for you guys over there? No?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
Oh, it seems to be fixed now.
Okay, perfect. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. So my name is Beth Cohen-King, and I'm the Marketing Director at Margolis Bloom and a semi-moderator for today. So for Margolis Bloom, we work with our clients to find the best estate planning or elder law solution for each client's unique situation and goals. We bring to this effort 30 years of experience and a commitment to providing the highest level of personalized service. And we are lucky enough today to have, sure I can advance the slide here, to have Kate Granigan. She's the CEO from Lifecare Advocates. And today our focus is going to be on what's next for life during and after the pandemic, and what's now going to be our new normal. So we have Laura Goodman from M&B, and they're going to discuss today the long-term effects of the pandemic for elder care, from the life care planning to other legal considerations. I think they're going to have a fruitful discussion, and it'll cover a lot of different concerns, such as isolation, where is the best place to age now, and decisions you have to make along the way, technology shifts in elder care and specifically around healthcare and advocacy. So I think it's going to be a great conversation today. Just a few housekeeping tips. So there's a question panel to write in any questions or concerns that come up, and we'll do our best to answer in real time at the end of the conversation. And if we don't, we will follow up afterwards. And if for any reason you do need to jump off, we are recording this. So usually it's about a week turnaround time before all the assets get up on the website and the emails go out. So with that, Kate, I will let you take it from here.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here today and spending some time with Laura and talking a little bit about what we know now as, really we talk about it as the new normal, but in our practice, we actually use the term the now normal because, I think things continue to change as we're going through what is still, the issues related to COVID. So our hope today is, the COVID, and I think Laura and I talked about, really has sparked such concern and anxiety for people and so many unknowns that it's so important for people to really think about what they can control and what's within their scope of, what they can do, both from a health or environment point of view, but also legally, and getting themselves in a place where they feel prepared for what is still the pandemic as things unfold, but also for other events that they may not be able to fully predict or control. So I think that's our starting point. Laura, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I don't. I think that's a good summary, and we're going to go through kind of the environmental shifts, the new technologies that we're using, and then how seniors and really everyone can feel more engaged and more in control of the process during these times.
Okay, so I think really we picked a few topics, as Laura just said. We're going to talk a little bit first about the environment. And as life care managers, our practice, we're really often asked to guide people through the environment in which they should live as they age and what's best suited. And that really varies and has always been an important conversation for people to consider, whether it's for themselves as they plan ahead or whether it's for an aging loved one. And what I would say is, during the pandemic, we as a practice were getting more conversation about this than ever. People who have their loved ones living in a home, maybe with caregivers or caretakers, they were struggling with that isolation and challenges that they found there. And then, on the flip side of that, people who were residing in an assisted living or an independent living or perhaps a skilled nursing community were also struggling. Were they in the right place? Were they in the right environment? And unfortunately, based on what we know, was some of the most hard hit environments were some of the senior communities where people were living. And so with that, a lot of people began to question their decision of being in those environments. And really for us, the conversation was about why they were there to start with, and really evaluating what some of the risks versus benefits of making a change, perhaps, or what they could do to make that environment more suited during the pandemic. But so many people, I think, really struggled with the experiences with restrictions, for instance, with being able to visit their loved one, being able to lay eyes on them in person, knowing that they were missing out on group dining and some of the things and activities that, were maybe some of the reasons they had moved there to start with. So I think what our takeaway was, and we helped our families and their loved ones think about, was what was your goal for being there, or what's your purpose and what's most important? And then really helping them evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, and then come away with what their best solution was. And that's, again, as I said, never an easy conversation. Those decisions are big considerations, but during the pandemic, more than ever, I think people really had trouble working through that. So we, did our best to support. But Laura, were your experiences with that in your practice?
Yeah, we certainly did. And I think in particular, families who had family members who have dementia or, Alzheimer's or cognitive declines, I think the isolation and the restrictions can be even more taxing on those families and those patients in particular. So obviously, depending on the person's diagnosis and certainly their cognitive capacity, those are all things that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, definitely. And I think other things, we'll get to this in a few other slides, but it's, what were the challenges, and then what can we help people, post pandemic or, mid pandemic, what can we do to help people prepare a little better?
Right. Right. And so in our practice, we obviously deal quite a bit with individuals who are going into long-term care, whether that be in nursing homes, assisted livings, or trying to get cares and supports in their homes. And we've certainly seen a decline over the last decade in nursing home admissions in particular. So this chart, it might be a little small for you, but it says that in 2009, the population of nursing home residents in Massachusetts was around 44,000. In 2019, that was down to less than 35,000. So we were already seeing this decline even before COVID hit. We haven't seen updated numbers yet, but I think we can safely assume that there is going to be quite a drop off as well after 2020 in the nursing home population. That can be because some people are more hesitant to go into nursing communities. They don't want to be in those group living arrangements. I think there's also some restrictions that nursing homes are putting in place in terms of staffing and capacity that's going to decline the available beds. I don't know how long those restrictions will stay in place, but certainly we're going to expect to see these numbers go down even further. And the reasons for that, I think the longer term view that we've seen is that people prefer to age in their homes rather than in a facility. As they're trying to plan for aging in their homes, it's important to consider what the cost of that is going to be, and can they safely achieve those home care solutions. So, there certainly are programs available for certain individuals who are both clinically eligible and financially eligible if they are getting home care services. So in particular, the Mass Health program offers some benefits and supports for home care. Of course, you do have to be financially eligible for those programs, and we're not going to get into the eligibility criteria because it's quite involved, and we have some other webinars on that topic specifically. But just something to be aware of, there is, especially for families that are providing care within the family, if you have family caregivers, a child caring for a parent, or a sibling or something who's who's providing care for an adult sibling. There are certain programs. There is what's called the PCA program through Mass Health that allows the individual to kind of hire their own caregivers. And they can't hire a spouse or a legal guardian, but they could hire, an adult child or another family member or a friend who provides personal care services. There's also an adult foster care benefit that basically provides a monetary stipend to caregivers who live with the patient and who provide the assistance with activities of daily living. So there are publicly supported programs that can help families out in this situation. Other than that, if you're lucky enough to have a long-term care insurance policy, your long-term care insurance may cover home care services. So that's something to certainly look into. And other than that, there's obviously private pay. So you can certainly pay out of pocket to get services in place.
Sure. Yeah, I think a couple other things that bear mentioning is, again, all of these things are dependent on, as you said, Laura, eligibility clinically, but also financially. But there's also the PACE program, and through the ASAPs, the Aging Service Access Points, there's often programs that people could be eligible for. So I do think that that's their goal, as you said, to really know that these benefits are out there. There's also the VA attendance benefit, and so there are some monetary opportunities, as you mentioned, that I think people, don't immediately need to look at the cost of home care, and if it's not reachable privately, to think they can't do that. So I think it is important to know that these benefits exist.
Yeah, and also even within the financial, even within the financial eligibility, even if you kind of if you kind of Google the eligibility, you're like, oh no, there's no way I could meet that. There are ways to plan around that and do kind of spend downs and other planning methods. So it's always something to explore if home care is something that's needed.
Yeah, I think that's some of the important things is, as you said, these are very involved. So it's not that we can go through them all today, but it's really important to know that they're there and seek some guidance if, in fact, people think they may be able to avail themselves to those programs. So I think the next topic we wanted to cover, which has really, I think, technology and those kinds of things in the world of older adults and elder care and just in general. I think that it has really been a booming area, and we're seeing more and more opportunities to use technology to keep people safe in their homes. I think with COVID and with what we saw is the reality that there's things like telehealth and the technology that we move to very often for medical care, and that people were able to virtually visit doctors and do follow-ups when they didn't necessarily need to do that. I think also things like prescription and delivery services, having the appropriate meds and taking them safely is so important to the well-being of older adults. And we know that, med errors are one of the things that send people to the ER more often than not, unfortunately, along with med errors, and that can sometimes even cause falls and those things. So having prescriptions managed well, if you're not living in a community that provides that, in assisted living or skilled nursing, if you're living at home or your loved one's living at home, making sure that these things are in place can be very important and really help with someone's health and well-being. Meal delivery services, I think we all probably learned about Instacart and a lot of other things that made life easier during pandemic. And certainly for older adults who were more highly at risk, obviously, with the risks and the results of COVID, I think setting people up with these kinds of opportunities has really been important. And I think that's been kind of a critical opportunity. For some of our clients, we found that, they may have had some issues with dietary needs or special needs in their meals. And we were able to find, there's personalized delivery services that will cook for them for their needs. So that also is been a real good find during COVID. Medical supply delivery. Boy, PPE was one of the things that we couldn't find, right? When we needed to, allow staffing to come into the house or safely visit a loved one maybe in their home. And so knowing that those things are important and stocking up on them is also important. And then lastly, smart technology for safety. One of the things we know is there's a lot going on with things like smart sort of passive monitoring in the home. And for people who are living alone, really knowing that things like the Nest or things like Google have all kinds of technology that can really help a senior live safely, access technology, and then also for a loved one who's not there, and maybe that person can live independently but has some risk, using smart technology can really be a godsend to keep people in their home safely monitored and get help when they need it. So I think all of those things have really been important, and I think it really became very clear during COVID. I do think one of the challenges that we saw and really had to get creative with was when you have somebody who may have a cognitive impairment, they're living at home, or an older couple, having somebody that can help them with the technology is critical, because it's all great, but if you can't use it, or it's not familiar, or if it feels scary, then people aren't going to use it. So there are companies that we found that were able to, sometimes in some cases we'd have an iPad shipped to someone's home, and then there are companies who can go on and set that up for them. They don't have to do it in the home, so there wasn't the risk of exposure. So there's a lot of creative ways that people can use technology. And I think, we were talking a little bit, Laura, I think a lot of that, I don't think is going to go away. I think things like getting a virtual visit for a follow-up with a doctor, keeping an older person in the middle of winter from having to risk, going out and slipping on ice, or getting into a doctor's office when they're doing a well visit and then become exposed to something that makes them ill. Those are risks that are existent, pandemic or no pandemic. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to see, Medicare has, I think, continued to pay for telehealth. I think that's going to be a trend. And I think we are going to be able to benefit from some of the trends that came through the pandemic, but also will hopefully remain. And I think you have some experience with that too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've really had to make a lot of changes in our own practice in terms of how we accommodate clients and kind of keep things moving during the pandemic. And obviously there's always some challenges kind of as you're building these new methods out and getting everything set up. But I think a lot of the kind of virtual meetings and things like that we are able to do now is great and can connect people that maybe wouldn't be able to come in to an in-person meeting. So I think, a lot of people have, especially older clients, may have this more traditional view of legal assistance, where you go in person, you meet with a lawyer face to face, sit down around a table, pass papers, things like that. And that's still true to an extent, but I think we've really been able to use, things like video conferencing to, try to give that traditional legal assistance still be able to do that during the pandemic. And especially with Zoom, we find that we're able to bring in other family members who maybe wouldn't be able to participate in those conversations because they live across the country or, just don't have schedules that line up. And so we're happy to accommodate that if our clients want to include other family members. We're kind of relying more on electronic correspondence when we can. We have, secure email servers, secure encrypted email and secure document, uploading capabilities to make sure that we are obviously maintaining everyone's confidentiality and then security around sensitive information. But, able to kind of get documents to people immediately and not have to rely on the mail in some cases is great. Also, one big change that we saw this year was back in, I think it was in April, the state passed a remote notarization law that allows us to remotely notarize documents via Zoom. And so that has been a huge benefit for our clients who don't want to, travel to a law office to sign documents. under all of these restrictions. So we are actually there's quite a bit. It's not as easy as just kind of logging in like this and signing documents. There are a lot of procedures that we have to go through to make sure that it's all legally compliant. But I think that's something that we don't know how long that's going to be in place. We are hoping, right now it's a temporary law, we're hoping that something permanent will be passed in the future. But that has been very helpful. And even our probate work, our work in the probate courts has mostly gone virtual. We're electronically filing pleadings for probates and guardianships. Even when there are hearings on matters, they are happening on Zoom. I'm sure most of you by now have seen the video yesterday of a court hearing that went a little awry on Zoom with a cat filter. If you haven't seen it, you should Google it. It's hysterical. But that's something that could very realistically happen these days, because if you just log into a court hearing and your kid was playing with their computer before, that could absolutely happen. So these are, things have changed a lot in the year. I hope some of these things do continue, because I think they're convenient for people.
Yeah, I agree. I think hopefully there are some gems that will come out of this for ease and for convenience. So I do think that would be great. Yeah, the cat video is a must. If you haven't seen it, you need to Google that. All right, so I think we can go to the next slide. Oh, Beth. Yes.
We've added some filters for them. just
exactly.
Okay.
I think we can go to the engagement slide. Yep, there we go.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about technology as a connector, as a way to monitor someone's safety. I didn't say on that slide, and I will say it here, sort of full, awareness that if we're thinking about monitoring someone in their home, there's obviously considerations, permissions, all of those things. So, smart houses and technology that monitors is all great, but, you have to make sure you have permissions. If there's, help or staff in the home, you can't, they have to be informed. There's all kinds of things that have to be considered. So I say that because, it is important and there's lots of benefits, but there's also, privacy and ethical issues we need to keep in mind. So, but if we think about engagement, I don't know if any of you have heard, but really through the pandemic, this really started, if you haven't heard it, the whole idea that social isolation really has affected so many adults, and it is as detrimental as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So that was a sort of health study. They realized that many people with, social isolation is so detrimental to so many people. And I think it's magnified when you're talking about people with cognitive impairment and people who aren't, it's bad enough for those of us who were, locked up in our house and unable to see the people we care about and love. But if you have, on top of that, a cognitive impairment and you're not aware of what's going on and why your loved ones aren't seeing you or why they're visiting you outside for 15 minutes with a mask on, none of that makes sense very often. And so, the isolation that people experienced was great. And the impact of it in terms of just decline in, mental capacity, depression, and the like was really very, very, evident. And we saw it in many of our clients because when we would see our, we like families, often as a care manager, families live at a distance. And so they count on us to make visits to their loved ones in the assisted living or the memory support or the skilled nursing. And like all others, when those places shut down by state regulations, we weren't able to see our clients as we normally would to, get their needs met, make sure things were going well, and advocate for them. And that engagement, once we began to see them again, we did recognize that many of them had lost weight. Many of them had other issues and evidence of decline and depression. And so I think all this to say really helping people weigh the risk versus benefit. I think we're beginning to look now, and we know more as people are vaccinated, letting families and helping people to think about what's it like to have someone not seen at all. Many of our clients said we saved them from COVID, but now they're going to die of loneliness, so I really think that's an important factor for people to consider themselves. And, you know, I think what technology did is it did offer the opportunity, and whether somebody was in their home or whether they were in a community assisted living or an independent living, those environments got incredibly creative. They would bring in the iPads and you know, they did all they could to keep their residents and their folks connected to family. We began to see so much of that. I think some of the other fabulous things that happen is, you know, now, you know, you might have not been able to, you know, from your home, you could travel through, you know, museums and go to the opera. And, you know, there was so much being live streamed that people were getting online entertainment that, again, I think would be lovely to continue for people. So that kind of engagement and helping people make sure they had the technology set up to do it, I think is something we learned and have now done with our clients to make sure they really are set up. Technology can be scary and for anybody, myself included, but I think really helping people overcome that and finding devices that fit someone's needs is really important.
Yeah, so we've certainly seen, obviously we kind of assist clients in different capacities, but we've certainly seen over the past year, we've had a lot of clients who are understandably having anxiety about kind of everything. And, you know, sometimes the way that manifests is trying to kind of take control of things and try to make sure their affairs are in order. So I think this past year has been a reminder to, you know, certainly take a look at what you have for estate planning documents. If you don't have estate planning documents, I'm certainly considering adding something. And, you know, as you are thinking about this, there's certainly some considerations that we recommend people think about. And the first is your estate plan up to date? You know, we generally recommend that people take a look at their estate plan at least every 5 years. It doesn't mean you have to make changes every 5 years, but certainly take a look at it and just make sure what you have in there is still consistent with what you want. You know, have you named people in your documents who can make your financial decisions if you became incapacitated, who can make your healthcare decisions if you wound up in the hospital? You know, I actually think that is probably the most important part of an estate plan. It's, you know, people think of the will and, you know, what happens to your property. You need to make sure that you have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy in place, because if you do become incapacitated and you don't have individuals appointed, your family, your loved ones are most likely going to have to go to court to get authority to take action on your behalf. I think sometimes people assume that, oh, my spouse can make those decisions, but that's actually not the fact. You actually do need a legal document appointing them. So it's important to have those, and they're very simple to put in place. Particularly where this, you know, we're dealing with a healthcare crisis. You want to make sure that the person that you have named as your healthcare agent knows what your wishes would be. And I think that's kind of changed, that may have changed with COVID. I think there's a lot of therapies and interventions that are being used for COVID that people really didn't consider before. So, you know, you have to think about, would I want to be intubated? Would I want to be on a ventilator? You know, would I want some of these immunotherapies and these kind of more experimental therapies that, you know, everything is so new with COVID, you know, are these things that you would want for yourself? And make sure that your healthcare agent knows what your wishes are. Have these discussions with them. They're not pleasant discussions, but they're important discussions to have, to just so you feel comfortable that the person who may need to advocate for you in the future is doing so with your best intentions at heart. And certainly when you're doing any kind of estate planning during the pandemic or any time, you want to make sure that you know, your communications with your lawyer are confidential and that there's security in place. So you just want to make sure that whoever you are working with takes client confidentiality seriously, takes you know, security seriously, that they're using remote platforms and email messaging services that have, you know, built-in protection so that your information is going to be protected to the extent possible. So.
Yeah, I think one of the other things we talked about, because I think there has been so much with remote and with opportunities like this, it probably bears mentioning, and we talked a little bit about just the other side of that coin, which is the risks. And there has been a considerable amount of scams going on. that really people are, we've tried to help people be aware of and stay safe from. So I think it does matter, it is important to know that the person you trust and that, you're dealing with people you know and trust, that they have the appropriate confidentialities and platforms in place, and that you don't make decisions or work with people who you can't check out or someone can't check out for you. So that's where I think your advisors come in and really can help keep you safe.
Okay.
All right. I don't know. Yeah, if we have any other comments here, I think we can, I think we can probably take some questions, unless there are other things you can think of, Laura. Kind of covered a lot of topics in a broad way, but hopefully a few things for people to think about. I think one thing we did talk about, I just want to mention as we were talking about planning, and I think this is important, COVID or no COVID, is if you are a caregiver living in a home, maybe you're caring for a spouse or a loved one, that you really need to consider the planning part of things, which includes things like, what happens if I become sick? I know that this was really one of the scariest things for people during the pandemic, is that, not only becoming sick, that they or their loved one would go to the hospital without anyone with them, but they also didn't necessarily have a plan in place. And if they were ill quickly and needed to leave. So I think those things are really the two things to think about, is what's our plan B, what happens, and what's our emergency plan if I become ill and I'm a caregiver of somebody who would need support and care in my absence. I think that's where some of the planning conversations come in, and making sure you've articulated that. And then I think one of my colleagues, and we think of it now all the time for our clients, is making sure you have a binder, a folder for each of you that outlines all of the things that are important to know. When we were in the midst of the pandemic, we had clients with dementia that would go to the ER by themselves. No family members could go, no care managers could accompany them, and normally we might. And so that folder was critical, because it might not have, it may have said, what are their medications, but it also talked about what some of their fears are, what are their behaviors, and how to understand their needs with somebody with impairment that might not be able to speak for themselves. So I think those are two takeaway, pieces that is not COVID specific, but it really became clear and highlighted.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Kate and Laura, so much. So, I mean, I completely agree. We're in this sort of ever-changing world, and adapting and pre-planning can seem like hurdles, but any preemptive planning can only help, and help us both stay organized and ahead of any pitfalls that sort of come our way. So we do have a few questions. I'm just going to read them, and you guys can field them as you think works for you. So here's the first one. Would appreciate the resource name for a company that does technology setup virtually. Have not been able to find that myself.
Absolutely. And I think you said it will indicate who is available. Okay. It's a company out of New York, and once we're off, I'll remember it perfectly, but I can get that information to them. It was a company that went into the homes, but now they really pivoted with COVID, and now are doing just as I said. They will ship technology. They will log in, much like if you have an IT department and your computer's broken, you know how they can miraculously show up on your computer. They had ways to go in, set things up, and walk people through their technology needs. So I can absolutely get someone that information.
Okay, Kate, this one is also for you. As an aging life care manager, where do you see your kind of work going?
Great question. I mean, I'll tell you, and here's a plug for the National Association of Aging Life Care Managers. It's called ALCA. We are a national organization of people that do what we do all across the country. I happen to be on the board of directors. So, we think, a lot of the work we do is very high touch and very engaged with our clients. And, if someone told me pre-COVID that I would be doing a virtual assessment of someone's needs in order to help them find placement when we couldn't go see them at the hospital and then, accompany them through a system, I would have told you were crazy. That wasn't something we would have ever done. It's, but now I think it's opened the opportunity to do that and use our skill set creatively. As Laura, we are now doing, virtual consultations with families from across the country. Their parents are here, we're helping them here, but we're seeing them on Zoom when we weren't normally doing that. So I think our experience, really is helping people navigate all kinds of things, including the healthcare system, help, navigate housing and entitlements, helping them find people like Laura to help with the legal matters, financial folks, and we can really be a conduit to understand and uniquely recommend and help set up someone's plan. So where I see us going is continuing to do that work. I think the expanse of the older population is not changing. And so I think we will have the opportunity to work with people ongoingly. We are seeing more planners. We're seeing younger clients, which has been, I've been in the business for 20 some odd years. And I dreamed of the day that people weren't just calling us in crisis. So we're now seeing people who want to have control and really map out their own aging. And it's really great. So I see us hopefully helping lots more people do that.
I've also noticed younger families looking to do estate planning, but so it's always kind of been hard to get people in their 30s with young kids to think about what would happen if. It's not something people want to think about, but I think this pandemic unfortunately has made people think about that, and so that's a good point. There a lot more people are thinking about these unpleasant things.
In terms of more questions, actually, there are a few on the technology piece. So maybe, Kate, if you get the information for it, we can send out any resources that help with technology.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
And we can do that with the follow-up. This will also answer someone else's question. We will have a recording of the video that will be available within the next week. So that you'll have that, and then we'll send that with an email and maybe with a list of some of the resources, if that helps. Let's see. What kind of financial support is available from Medicaid once requirements are met for 24/7 care in the home? Laura, do you know?
It depends. Yeah, but I can give you some broad things. But so for example, if you're eligible for the PCA program, the Mass Health will pay about $16 an hour for PCA services. It doesn't mean that you have a blank check and you can submit as many hours as you want. There is an evaluation that's done to determine what's medically appropriate for the individual. But that's just an example of the PCA payments, and then the adult foster care payment, which is a stipend. Again, it's not a guaranteed amount, but I think it's up to, I want to say $18,000 a year could be the potential financial stipends that is paid to a family, a live-in, not necessarily family, a live-in caregiver. And then in addition to that, if there's kind of a more broad array of home care services through Mass Health Community Benefits, that it wouldn't necessarily be a financial benefit, but it would be providing reimbursement for other home care agencies to come in and provide services.
Okay.
I think just to say, and I think you might agree, Laura, is that I think the hard part is, I would tell you that although Mass Health, and through being creative and bringing in multi-layered support and services that someone's eligible for can really make a huge dent in someone's home care needs. Unfortunately, we have a very difficult time finding that for 24/7. It really is, 24/7 is really almost, I don't want to say not available, but that's a very hard bill to fill. So when someone needs 24/7, that's about the tipping point that you usually are not able to stay at home with Medicaid. I think that is, and at least in my experience. I don't know about you, Laura.
No, that's definitely true. And I think a lot of people, what they if they can afford it, some people are able to, use the mass health benefit to, to get what they can, and then, may have to pay out of pocket for additional, overnight care or things like that to try to fill in the gaps. But yeah, if in terms of 24/7 care at that point, mass health is probably going to say that this person needs a nursing home.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see who might have the answer to this. Would you have any information about affordable housing, not low income or HUD, and any contacts that could help someone navigate this to qualify? So someone who's medium income and has some assets, but over 65.
Well, that's a hard spot. I don't know what you say, Laura, but like that is the place where I think there's such a limited opportunity. If you're talking about also someone who has some clinical needs, so most programs require you both to have a financial need, if you're not talking about just senior housing, low income housing and those things. Entitlement benefits, so you're looking at a clinical need as well as a financial need overlap. So in that case, I think one of the things that comes to mind immediately is that there are PACE slots in assisted living. People can qualify to utilize a PACE slot. I will tell you that they're almost never, they're hard to come by because typically they're reserved for people who are already paying privately in the assisted living, qualify because they've expended their funds and they are eligible both clinically and clinically as well as financially. We have been getting emails from different assisted livings that do accept PACE or have some PACE slots. Because of COVID, sadly, they've maybe lost folks that were living there and they're opening it up to the public, but that's not always the case. So that's what comes to mind for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. That's definitely a huge gap in services, not just here but everywhere. Yeah.
Okay, I think. Let's see. Oh. Someone just as a comment said PACE has had more open spots recently due to COVID deaths. So, okay. I think that is it. More complicated questions we can try to follow up after. And again, we will have a recording. Thank you to both of you. Thanks for everyone who attended. And if you have if there's specific webinars you want information on, please feel free to reach out to me. So I'm Beth Cohen King. It's bck@margolis.com, and we can see if we can get the right people to, the right experts involved to talk about it. And just remember that if there will be the recording if you weren't, if you want to pass this along to someone who wasn't able to attend. So be on the lookout for follow-up emails from me and from all of us. Plus, we will add in those resources to the email. So thank you all so much, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. And yeah, so we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
Stay
you.
well. Bye-bye.
Bye.